As Phil Sheridan writes at ESPN.com's NFL Nation, with Bradford returning, the Eagles get back to business. Phil, have we seen the end of the saga? Did Bradford clear up everything? Is all the questions, are they done? And is this thing ready to move on?
Boy, Mike, I really hope so. I do. I think he probably said the things he needed to say and was pretty upfront about everything, I thought. However, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I've worked my whole career in Philadelphia. And, something could come up any time in the next 10 or 10 years and bring this all up again and get people just as mad as they were to begin with. So I never say never on that kind of stuff because it's just the way the world works and the way Philadelphia certainly works with its sports figures. But I thought he handled it fairly well. I mean, he explained the timetable, which was a little different from some people's assumption of it. And he just explained his point of view. He said when he signed the contract, the 2-year deal, he knew it was a 2-year deal. He knew it was a short-term commitment from the Eagles. But, what he was looking for was an opportunity to, finally get the situation that has eluded him in his NFL career. He was the first overall pick in the 2010 draft by the St. Louis Rams. They had new offensive coordinator every year for the first 3 years. Pat Shermer was the first guy. That was the offense he, first learned in the NFL. Then Shermer left to become head coach of the Browns. And they started a succession of changes. And then the injuries came, just a year and a half, two back-to-back seasons, by tearing his left ACL. And then the trade to Philadelphia and going through a new team, learning a new team, learning a new offense, playing for Chip Kelly in a whole different kind of scheme. And then Kelly gets fired. And here there's a chance, okay, there's a new coach coming in. If they like me and they want me and they're offering him, $35 million that says they want him, this is a chance, to maybe finally get, if he could stay healthy, to really be the quarterback he was intended to be when he was taken with the first pick in the draft back then. And then, a few weeks later, he's finding out that, the training up to take Carson Wentz, and he's basically a placeholder. So, yeah, I can understand that would be frustrating to him, and he said it was frustrating, and he didn't think his head was going to be here in the right place if he stayed around and worked out for the voluntary workouts. So he went home, talked to his agent, and they thought the best strategy was to try to find a way to get that continuity that he was looking for. Mm-hmm. And they thought the Denver Broncos, having that quarterback situation they had, that was the opportunity. So it all made sense to me. He said he didn't really regret it, but that he wanted to be in Philadelphia. That's why he signed the contract here. He really likes his teammates. That's why he came back and wanted to be here and be with them, and he felt like they were supporting him. So I think there's no real cause for people to, take it as any kind of big issue on the team. I don't think it's going to cause any kind of fractures in the locker room, any of that kind of stuff. I think it's over with from their perspective. And everybody was out in the field yesterday, and it looked just like a normal practice. Any team, anytime you ever saw. There was no awkwardness, no weirdness going on. Bradford was running his bit. Carson Wentz was doing his part. Chase Daniel did his part. Everybody was, doing what they're supposed to do, and it seemed like everything was pretty much settled. Now, again, it's Philadelphia, it's the NFL, it's, the modern times with social media and everything else. Things could blow up again at any time, I guess, but I thought it was pretty well put to rest. Yeah,
and there are a lot of things that he said that I guess cleared some things up. Do you look at, he said that he found out about the trade on a Wednesday. He said he practiced the next day, and then basically his agent called him and said, I got a plan for you. You need to get off the field. It seems that Bradford really realistically didn't push for this, and a lot of people's reaction to that obviously is, well, why? And I think a couple of weeks ago, I was actually sick that day. I was at a funeral that day. Sam, you were talking about Sam with Josh when he was filling in for me, and you were talking about that he's kind of an introvert and he's a quiet guy. And you wonder if this is true, that his agent just told him what to do, and he feels, I guess that's right, I'm just going to do it. So because so many people can't envision not standing up and saying, well, I don't want to do that. Some people just don't have that personality, and I think Bradford's kind of probably a guy in that boat, right? Is he just not the kind of guy that you can see saying, no, Tom, we're doing it this way?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things there. I think, one of the things he said yesterday I think was also kind of revealing and true. He said, I have an agent, and I pay him, and he gives me, advice and counseling on this stuff. Tom Condon has been around the NFL for a long time. He was a player in the NFL. He was big in the NFL Players Association. He was a big figure there. became an agent, has represented a lot of top quarterbacks over the years, has handled a lot of different situations with a lot of different teams. He knows all that stuff. That's what I pay him to do, is to handle situations. And this is a situation. How do you handle it? I call my agent and say, look, here's what's happening. What can we do about it? And I don't think that Condon was telling him anything he didn't want to hear, or that he didn't making him do anything he didn't want to do. But if you hire an agent or a lawyer or somebody to give you advice on or a doctor for that matter, anything that they have an expertise in, and you pay them to give their opinion about your situation, it's up to you to take their advice or ignore it. But he feels like Condon's the guy that knows this stuff, and this is the situation. Now, he wanted, he wanted to stay in Philadelphia, re-signed here, hoping for a chance to become, the long-term quarterback. Every NFL franchise is looking for a guy to be that quarterback for them. That's what Bradford was hoping he would get the chance to be in Philadelphia. That's not going to happen with the Wentz, with the trade to get Wentz and the drafting of Wentz, and that's how he sees it. So that changed the situation for him, at least enough to go, all right, let's see what we can do here. And the Broncos situation at the time was very fluid. They didn't want to have a quarterback, and then they traded for Sanchez, but nobody was expecting him to be their guy for the long term. They hadn't yet drafted Paxton Lynch, so there was an opening there with a team that just won the Super Bowl. Seemed like a pretty decent situation if you could find a way to get there. But the Eagles were not willing to make that move. There were some talks apparently between the Broncos and Eagles, but nothing that went anywhere. So Bradford really has no choice except to come back and just try to play well and try to find that good situation that he wants somewhere else down the line. But I think it was a case where he called the guy that he gives him advice and whose advice he takes, and whose advice has gotten him close to $100 million in earnings so far in a 6-year career. So, that's pretty good advice from Tom Condon for the most part in Sam Bradford's life. So I think he just thought that was the way to go and made the most sense. His investment here was, he wanted to be here. He said that, but he's only been here for a year, and it wasn't like he was dug in here. If he's here for 2 or 3 years and then he has to go, it's going to be that much harder for him. So I can see that, cutting bait and moving on made a lot of sense at the time.
Phil Sheridan's with us, ESPN.com, NFL Nation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil. The agent actually makes out with the shorter-term deal, right? Because then he gets a chance to work out another deal and get paid again. So it kind of behooves Condon to keep him in that short-term deal, right?
Well, it depends. In this case it does, because it was a short-term deal for a lot of money. The agents paid a percentage of the contract, percentage of the deal they negotiate. So in this case, it's a lot of money, so it's a good windfall for Condon right away. And then, in the 2 years from now, maybe even a year from now, if he gets traded and works out a deal with somebody else, Condon's going to be negotiating yet another contract for Bradford. So, in that sense, it is. Although if you do a long-term deal with a guy and he's going to get that money, if you sign a quarterback, for example, to a 5 or 6 year deal, there's a good chance he's going to get the whole thing, because especially if he plays well. So in that case, you're getting a percentage of an even bigger deal, because it could be a 5-year deal that's worth $100 million, for example. You're going to get a percentage of all that. So it works both ways. If the guy's going to get the contract and get paid and get the money, you get a percentage of that no matter what. So in this particular case, Condon definitely does make out. But I think the main point for him is he's trying to find a good situation for the client, and Philadelphia had stopped being that situation for them. So it made sense to do what they did, at least for the short term. I think the plan was always try for the trade. If not, come back. The threat to not come to any of the offseason stuff was just part of the posturing of trying to force the trade. Once that didn't happen, there was no reason to stay out. Just coming back and rebuilding the bridges and all made a lot more sense for them.
Yeah, and as Bradford kind of indicated yesterday, because he has been criticized for signing the 2-year deal and then not really understanding what that means. He said, I fully understood what that mean. He said, I knew it wasn't a long-term deal. It was a 2-year deal. He was well aware of that, but his thought was that if he played well, that he would be able to create the stability. So it sounds like we're on the same page when they signed that deal of, hey, you've had some injury history, your play has been inconsistent, we like you, we want to see more. And Bradford, so it wasn't like, he didn't sound like he was sideswiped by the 2-year deal thing. He was well aware what he was getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. The way you kind of put it yesterday was that, I understand, and yes, this is not a 5-year deal, a long-term commitment kind of deal, but it gives him every opportunity at that point, in his view. If I play really well this year and we're going to the playoffs and I'm winning, we're winning games every Sunday, then there'll be a point in the near future where they can do that kind of a long-term deal, and they can really kind of settle down and be a franchise quarterback where he has a chance to be successful for a long time. That's what he's trying to find. As soon as Wentz comes into the picture, that's the end of that. But he understood that it was a short-term deal because the Eagles didn't want to get dug into a 5 or 6 year contract with a guy that's missed a year and a half of the last 2 seasons with knee injuries, and has been relatively brittle for a quarterback. He missed 2 games even last year with the injuries he had. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a guy that you were going to commit to. I mean, you kind of see Washington going through this with Kirk Cousins right now. There's a guy, not injuries with Cousins, but he just hasn't played well enough for long enough that they can be really sure about him. So they franchise tagged him. They're trying to work out a longer-term deal, but they really want to see more from him before they commit to a guy for 5 or 6 years, which is what that kind of deal would end up being. So it's pretty typical to do a short-term contract as they did with Bradford. This is better than using the franchise tag would be for a lot of reasons, salary cap reasons, and the way the Eagles can get out of it after the year and kind of not get hung up beyond the 1 year situation. So they have the second year as an option now, but it's their option. It's not having to tag them again for even more money. So it made sense to do the 2 year deal in lieu of using the franchise tag. But Washington's got almost the same situation with Kirk Cousins right now by using the franchise tag. So it's not an unusual situation, but just the way it all unfolded with signing Chase Daniel and then making all the moves they did to get up to the second pick and then drafting the quarterback there. I mean, clearly they are as stacked at the quarterback position, at least in terms of the money they're spending on it and the resources they've committed to it, as anybody in the NFL. So that is an odd situation for it's a unique situation in the league. So it's certainly not a situation for Sam Bradford personally.
Phil, yesterday, or maybe the day before it was, Michael Bennett told 710 ESPN that he almost threw up in his mouth and complaining about making $40 million. Is Sam Bradford complaining? I keep feeling that the fans get the money brought into this thing, and this is not about money. He's not complaining about money, and I know the fans are saying, shut up and you're making big money. But isn't that more of an indication that Bradford didn't care about the money? He wanted the fair chance to compete. This wasn't about money or anything about the amount of money where people keep criticizing him about the money he's making. And I think his actions are showing, I don't care that I'm making $40 million. I want the opportunity to stay at a place long term. Do you think that Bennett's comments were off base a little bit?
No, I think more than a little bit. I think he was completely ridiculous, actually. No knock on Michael Bennett. He's got his own situation in Seattle, I guess. But, the actual quote, direct quote was, I listened to Sam Bradford again, and it made me want to throw up in my mouth. And I'm like, when did he listen to Sam Bradford again? Sam Bradford has never said a word about any of this at that point in time. I mean, what Bennett said on the radio in Seattle, he said before Bradford talked yesterday. So he didn't listen to Sam Bradford again. He never listened to Sam Bradford at all. He's going on what people have said about Sam Bradford. He may have read some headline that said, maybe somebody wrote a column criticizing Bradford for being, unwilling to compete or being a coward or whatever people were saying about him. But that's where Bennett's reacting to that. Nothing that Sam Bradford ever actually said. So what Bennett said is absolutely baseless and ridiculous, and it has nothing to do with the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is Bradford had already made, whatever it is, $78 million in the 6-year contract that he signed originally with the Rams, and the Eagles paid the last year of it. He is, as a quarterback in the NFL, he's going to make what the market will bear, and that's not only his right to do that and his privilege to do that, but it's also a responsibility. I mean, you're not going to take, a veteran minimum contract to be the starting quarterback of an NFL team, just to be a nice guy about it. I mean, you have you belong to a union. Everybody that gets paid helps everybody else who comes after them to get paid more. I mean, that's how the union in sports, that's how the unions work. And so there's a little pressure to get everything you can when you're a high-profile player with a lot of leverage, as like a quarterback would be. So that's all in the mix, too. But Bradford's already banked $78 million. He doesn't need this money, to live or to live comfortably. He's already got that in the bank. Now, he wants to get paid his fair share and get what the market bears, because that's how this all works. That's certainly part of it. And certainly more money is always better. I mean, everybody wants more money. So I'm not saying he didn't want the money. I'm just saying that wasn't what's driving this with Bradford at all. He took a deal that the market is saying this is what a starting quarterback and at least a quality starting quarterback is going to make. So that is the money, what the money means to him in those terms, in terms of respect and stature with the team. But it also means that you're the guy that they're going to count on, and that's what he really was looking for, was that vote of confidence, and then that was withdrawn when they went and made the moves for Wentz. So that's kind of it's more of that's what's in play here than he's going to make the money. And he's going to make the money at some point with somebody somewhere anyway, and he's already made more than he'll ever need.
Yeah,
so I feel money was a real big factor.
Right. I feel like, people who are talking about this situation are talking about the wrong things. They're criticizing him for not wanting to compete and that he's made so much money that I don't feel bad for you. I don't think this is about feeling bad for this guy or that he got lied to or misled or anything like that. I think it's just a guy who was disappointed that he felt that he had this opportunity to prove to them, and he's not going to get that opportunity now. That's it. I don't think it's money, competition, feeling bad for him. I just think he's under the realization that I signed this deal thinking one thing, and now another thing has happened. And maybe there was a little shock from him, and people would say, well, why would he be surprised? He hasn't done anything. They gave him a 2-year deal. Well, guess what? The money the Eagles gave him maybe speaks otherwise, and you think of your own abilities better than maybe other people think of your abilities. And I think, look, I don't feel bad for him for any of this. I don't feel that he played it very well. But at the same time, I don't think that I don't think the whole situation was being looked at properly from any aspect or any angle. Here's just a guy who, realized my job is pretty much taken for me after I signed here thinking something else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of my colleagues in the media, who I like and respect and everything, normally and typically. But a lot of the reaction from a lot of people seemed to be, just ripping him for all this and not really, I don't think they really were getting the full picture of it. And it was just, people were ripping him because he didn't play as well last year as his money would indicate that he should have played. And you can make that argument. I mean, I think people also have a kind of certain resentment to Bradford because, like all the stuff I was talking about earlier.
He's made so much money.
Well, that, and, I talked about, he came into the NFL, and he was Rookie of the Year his first year with Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator, and then Shurmur left. And then he played in 2 different systems with 2 different coordinators the next 2 years, and then he blew out his knee twice. And when you actually just lay out the facts of Sam Bradford's career and how that affected him and what impact it had on his play and his performance, it starts to sound like you're making excuses for him, like he somehow is off the hook for everything that ever happened to him because of these other things that happened. But the fact is, everything the Eagles are doing right now, it's sort of based on what Andy Reid did with Donovan McNabb back in '99. We talked about that before. But the reason that they're doing this and the reason that Reid did it was because when you invest that much money in that important a position, it is your job to do everything possible to make that guy successful, to give him what it takes to be successful. Get him into a good offense that fits him, get him into a good situation with good teammates, with good coaches, and, nurture him and help him to become the player that everybody needs him to be to save their jobs and make the team successful. Well, that is everything that didn't happen for Bradford in St. Louis. The St. Louis situation is like a perfect example of how not to develop a quarterback. It's exactly the worst. There's actually a really good story on ESPN's new Undefeated website by Jason Reed about RG3 and what happened to him and kind of the backstory on how this guy went from being like the most exciting player in the league as a rookie to being cast aside by the Redskins just a couple of years later. And it's a really fascinating story. And one of the things that I didn't realize was that it makes really clear that Daniel Snyder did everything to make that trade happen and make the Redskins move up and pick RG3, and that Shanahan, the head coach at the time, wanted nothing to do with it. He didn't want any parts of it and was pretty much open about that. And he coached him that way. He coached the guy like he resented coaching him. He didn't really want him, and he didn't really want to try to make things fit his skill set and everything else. So, if you do it wrong, you can ruin the quarterback and you ruin your team and you get yourself fired. But if you do it right, like Andy Reid did with McNabb, they probably got more out of McNabb than McNabb would have gotten in any other situation if he'd gotten drafted by one of those other teams in '99. So you're trying to do the right thing and create the right situation. The Eagles are trying to do that with Carson Wentz right now, and that's admirable. But the casualty in that is Sam Bradford, who never got that opportunity himself as the number 1 pick, and he's not going to get it now.
No.
Like in Philadelphia.
Well, it's funny because you're right. I don't think when people look at quarterback situations, they take into account a lot of times, like people just say, well, Cleveland's a place where quarterbacks go to die, or Houston, and they have certain places that they have built in for that. But St. Louis would be one of those places. When was the last time St. Louis developed their own quarterback? And then people look at what Bradford has done and kind of, I've said before, the ACL problems, the guys who have the ACL injuries, that first year they come back, Tom Brady was not Tom Brady when he came back from that ACL. He was on the field, but that wasn't the same guy that we know. That's not an injury. You just come back on the field and start playing well. So I feel that as much as I want to give an opinion, and that's what I'm paid to do, and if it's a good opinion or a bad opinion on the guy, I can't figure out this guy's such an enigma because of so many built-in, and I hate to give built-in excuses, but he legitimately has them, and therefore I was willing to see more from him. And I don't feel bad for him because I do think the Eagles were in the right to draft a guy and groom him, but they also are, you're right, doing it the right way, Phil, getting a guy, letting him grow. Unfortunately, Sam is the guy that's kind of stuck in the middle of that.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. I mean, we talked about this before. If Andy Reid's handling of the McNabb situation where he had the number 2 pick in the draft, took McNabb, signed Doug Peterson as a veteran backup who knew the offense really well, could run things and help the young guy learn the offense. If that was the model, well, the Eagles did that with Chase Daniel and Carson Wentz. There was no Sam Bradford in Andy Reid's model. I mean, Andy Reid did not have, a guy. They basically got rid of Rodney Peete and Bobby Hoying, the quarterbacks that had been there the year before. I mean, they got rid of them almost immediately when Reid got there. They were out. He brought Peterson in and the rookie to develop. There was no Sam Bradford type guy. So that is the big flaw in sort of this adaptation of the Reid plan. It's the inconsistency, and that's the thing that's causing the most trouble. It seems like they wanted to follow the Reid plan, but the one place where they decided to diverge from that and do their own thing, that's what's been kind of blown up in the faces a little bit and caused some problems. I do think that it can be worked out. And the one thing Peterson kind of said yesterday that I thought was kind of an interesting, just to hear the way he said it, was something like, it's a great thing to have all these guys. I mean, I'm going to have Sam Bradford, who, is the kind of guy that we think can help us contend in the division race this year right away. And we have Chase Daniel here, who's going to be, a suitable backup if Bradford goes down, which is, with Bradford's history, is a very real thing. We have a guy we can plug in right away and still be competitive. And meanwhile, all along, we got this kid, who's got all the tools and all the ability, has not competed at this kind of, level of football. I mean, being from North Dakota State and all that stuff. But we're going to give him all the time in the world to just grow, learn things, and at some point, they go from having what they think is, maybe one or no quarterbacks to having 3 quarterbacks that they, really believe in. And in that sense, the league that's starved for quarterback play, and where the really great ones, almost all of them, are into the mid-30s at this point or even older. You're talking about a lot of these quarterbacks are going to be on the way out as this group of Eagles quarterbacks is kind of hitting its peak. So that's sort of the plan there. Get this whole thing and, stock up at the hardest position to fill and then try to make it all work.
Phil Sheridan at Sheridan Scribe here on the Sports Bash. Eagles OTAs continuing, game number 2. Next time we talk, Phil, I promise I will not ask you about Sam Bradford, not once.
You got a deal.